Well, hello everyone, good afternoon, and welcome back to our last session of the day. I hope you've all been enjoying the day, having a look at the amazing exhibitors, obviously enjoying the ice cream. I may have had a few too many, but is there really such a thing as too much ice cream in the first place? To close off our sessions today, we have the fantastic George Hazel, Director at eRail, who's going to be talking to us about that all-important topic on everyone's lips, funding. George, over to you.
Thank you, Daisy. Afternoon, everyone. Actually, I was going to say, I was at the 10 o'clock session, and there was one of the phrases there was talking about subsidy in the rail systems. A couple of my other hats is I'm a board member for Strathclyde Partnership for Transport and also Transport for Edinburgh as an advisor. And I'm having a one-man campaign to stop using the word subsidy and use investment instead. In terms of roads, we never talk about subsidy. We always talk about investment. So I'll keep at it until they change that. So it's good to be here today. I don't think you can see the slides all that well. Are they up? Yeah, there you go. Yep. So when somebody mentions land value capture, my background is transport and planning, by the way. I'm one of the directors of eRail. So we have a partnership with guys from SLC Rail out of Birmingham who look after the rail side. We've got a property side, and I look after the transport and planning side. And when you mention funding and land value capture to people, it means all sorts of things to all sorts of people. When I was a consultant working for a Canadian consultancy, I looked at all the various methods, tariffs and SIL and tax increment financing, whatever. And so we've always got a problem. So what I'm talking about is that in fact what these guys did with the Canadian Pacific Railway and for Metropolitan London, it's the relationship between land use and transport and the increase in value around a railway, and not only heavy rail, but light rail, BRT as well, streetcar, that actually increases the value of land, the value of property around railway stations, and it's well known. I'll say a bit about that. The problem is what they did, we can't do, because it would be illegal. They basically bought planning permission. And so the whole system at the minute is locked, and that's what we've been working on for the past 10 or so years, trying to get round that to provide a system to capture that increase in wealth that the taxpayer pays for and to share that with the landowners particularly. This is actually a slide from Toronto, and it just illustrates what I'm trying to say, and there's 2 points to this slide. The first point is that because stations and rail attract development, then that makes what we do possible. And second, but it's because of increasing accessibility. And secondly, because of that situation, there's always a message for planners that they need to, whether it's zoned for planning or not, and I'll say a bit about this in a minute, the planning, the zoning is going to come either under pressure or is going to change. And we need to react to that pre, not post, if we want to capture land value. So it's the value created by the station and the transport service that we harness, or part of it, to fund the public transport. This is not debt. It doesn't have to be paid back. This is actual real money, increase in value, that happens around land and property, around railway stations. And there's loads of studies that shows that this is real. This is from Montreal, but I could tell you another 10, 20 studies. On average, within a kilometre of a railway station, kilometre and a half, you're talking about an increase in value of about 20%. Now that's the end value. In other words, if a developer builds a house within a kilometre of a railway station, she can sell it for 20% more. We're at the other end, and this is the big difference. So we're not talking about SIL, we're not talking about Section 106. You can still do these, but we're at the other end with the landowners who have the real money. That's where the real money is, and I'll say a bit more about that in the next slides. So it's real, and it happens around the stations. And here's a good example. Worcestershire Parkway Station. Now, in defence of with our friends at Worcestershire County Council, we weren't ready to launch our scheme when they planned that station. But it's an interesting case study. SLC Rail actually managed the project. If those of you don't know it, two major lines cross, and it's a wonderful new station that's operational. And it was zoned as a park and ride and nothing else. There was no planning. It was zoned as Greenbelt, I think. So there was no plans for any development around the railway station. The station was built, and the planning applications, irrespective of the zoning, came in, thick and fast. And now, the plans are, for the local plan, 5,000 new homes up to 2040, and another 5,000 after 2040 in the next local plan. That would have financed 100% the railway. 100%. And so this is a big game to play that we're trying to urge people to listen and to get your head round, because what I'm going to tell you is different to what happens at the minute. And this kind of all changed for us with the Northumberland line. We were approached about 2017 by Northumberland County Council, and they said, we like your idea, so we'd like to try it. We'd like to prove if it works or not in our method. And so we identified about 40-odd sites, 46 I think it was. We looked at the plans, we talked to the planners, we talked to transport people, and we whittled them down to a reasonable 21 that had a chance of getting planning permission and didn't have subsidence and, you know, et cetera, or flood risk. And these 21 are the basis of the contribution agreements that we negotiated on behalf of Northumberland County Council. We don't work for the private sector. We must always work, because of the independence of planning, with the public sector. We negotiated contribution agreements, and I'll explain these in a minute, on these 21 sites. And it worked. We raised, the contribution agreement secured between 30 and 40 million, which is about 20-25% of the capital. Now, I worked in local government. I was Director of City Development for Edinburgh for a number of years. And I used all sorts of things in terms of planning agreements. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. So this is substantial money we're talking about. And that money is shared between the landowner or landowner developer and the procurer of the railway. And to give you an example of how this works, we look at sites, we examine them, we consult, we look at the plans, and then we sift through them into potential sites. And here's an interesting one. This is a site, a new station. Northumberland Line is due to open fairly soon. It's being built. The stations are being built. This is at South Newsham. Now, currently, these three sites outlined in blue are Greenbelt. And they may remain Greenbelt. We have no role in planning whatsoever. So the planning department, the county council could refuse these. But there is a logic to saying, here's an existing settlement. These are three sites around a station within walking distance, sustainable development. Why would you not look at that? And so these are three of the sites. And suddenly, they go from 10K an acre to $1 million an acre because of the housing. That's the difference that we're talking about. And so we go through all of that. Now, up until a certain stage, and I'll give you you won't be able to see it in this light, but I'll give you the 5 stages we go through. Up until stage 3, which is the contribution agreements, that's confidential to the client, to the local authority. So we don't get into any kind of negotiations with the landowner on their behalf. So we're working as a partner with the local authority, but with no remit in terms of the planning or the transport. That's all unchanged. We're simply trying to share the funding, the uplift in funding. Now, when it gets to stage 3 and the contribution agreements, up until that time, it's a voluntary discussion between the landowners and ourselves. If they say, yeah, I'm up for this, the negotiations start with our property team, and if they agree, they sign a contribution agreement, then it becomes legal. The contribution agreement is about 18, 20 pages long. It's a legal document built into title of the ground. So they can't build, nobody can build, they can't sell it without building, without giving the money into the fund. And you can see the points there. It's not a tax. It's a sharing of additional funding that wouldn't be there if the railway wasn't there. Okay? So it's landowners, private and public, can contribute with this. And payment becomes due, and this is important of why it works. Payment becomes due when two things, when the value is created. So two things happen. One, the railway is operational, and two, they get planning permission. If neither of these things happen, hence the sifting earlier on, they don't pay, because that will mean there's no value created. And that there's financial management to do with that. And they're also time controlled. So the contribution agreements are signed by the local authority, us, and the particular land owner. So we've completed our work on Northumberland Line. We're just waiting on these contribution agreements to come into effect. They'll go into a fund, which I'll say a bit about in a minute. But we've moved on. We are working on about 16 projects in the UK, some of them single stations, most of them heavy rail, one or two light rail, one or two trackless tram, or one trackless tram stroke BRT. We've surveyed in terms of our initial stage one, will it work, will it not work? Because there has to be a doubt as to whether the funding is available or not. If the landowner thinks the government is going to fund something 100%, you won't get anything. There's no point in us going in. But if there's a funding gap or if there's no funding, then they call us in. So we've surveyed about 150 miles of new or reopened railway lines, 65 new stations. Now, at the end of these surveys, the potential, I underline the fact that the potential of just these 16 is about 800 million in LVC. That is significant money for the rail industry, significant money for any other government. And that's why this is so important. And not only that, and I'll come on to this in a minute, because you're helping to support development around stations, you're then supporting sustainable development around stations. You're helping your business case for the project because the revenue will go up, because more people will be using the railway. You're supporting local businesses, you're cutting car traffic, or the potential to cut car traffic and accidents and emissions. Why wouldn't you do it? That's the question. And I'll come to that in a minute. There's one or two reasons why some people don't. There's a lot of detail in this, and I haven't got time to go. To go through it. But these are the four stages. Presumably, you can get access to this. I'll give you my email address at the end, but if you haven't, I'll send it to you if you haven't. But I presume you can get access to this. So the first two stages are outline surveys. Will it work? Is it worth doing? Here's what we think we can raise. Do you want to continue? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Then we go on. And approach the landowners after that. And then we take care post-implementation of raising the money. This is an important one as well, and the key one you need to look at are the two triangles, especially the green triangle. The more doubt, the earlier for us, the better. Like in Northumberland, we knew where the line was. We knew it was Northumberland's number one priority, but the landowners knew that it might not happen, it probably wouldn't happen, or it might not happen for a long time because there was quite a sizable funding gap. That's ideal. But as a project goes on, and there's more chatter in the media and more chatter politically, developers start to say, hey, this might actually happen. And they start to take options. And as soon as they start that, the market kicks in. The money that we could have raised slowly disappears until at funding certainty, you won't get any. And so it's really important that we get in as early as possible into the process. So where does the money go? It goes into a fund. I think it's an escrow fund. It's a protected fund. It's dedicated solely to the project. This is important for the landowners as well. It's dedicated solely to the project. Can't be spent on anything else. Has to go to that project. It's set up and managed by us. As I say, they're registered in the title. And when the land is sold, the fund manager calls for the funds, disperses to the project. Fund manager monitors reports to the promoter, and the promoter has step-in rights. The fund will not be lost, even though something happens to us, to ERAIL. The funds will not be lost. They'll be sitting there for the local authority to claim. So, landowners and developers. One thing I was going to say about, I'll come back to that in a minute, about Northumberland. Landowners and developers. I think most of this I've said, but one of the things I'd like to highlight here is the independence of planning. This was a big issue. Are we biasing planning? So we had to work very hard about how we do that. And there's a number of ways that we do that. For example, the whole planning regime, the planning authority, and possibly even the local authority, does not know the detail. They might know that there's 30, 40 million up for grabs, but they don't know the detail, because the danger is that might influence the planning situation. So there's a number of things that we've put in place to make sure that independence of planning is maintained. They retain 100% control at all times. We have no powers in terms of that. I've said we can't work for developers as well. And that last point is important because the spin-off effects of this, as we're beginning to see in Warwickshire Parkway, as we're beginning to see in Northumberland as well, are for the environment. Not only have you got this fund, which, by the way, could be spent on revenue and capital. It's just a fund. It's just money. You can use it how you like. Then you have these spin-off benefits for the environment and for the economy as well. Now, lastly, I want to talk about trends. How easy has this been? The answer is not easy. And one of the reasons is the whole governance issue. That what we do and what a lot of people do in terms of mobility as a service and all that kind of stuff, we have to work laterally across Treasury, economic development, estates, planning, transport, Chief Exec's office, and you get to know all sorts of people. And if you get 2 tiers in a local authority, then you got double that. And so trying to bring that together, we had a very good person in Northumberland County Council who did that. Trying to bring that together is very much an issue. Are they all on the same page? Planners, transport, economic development people. Are they all thinking the same way? Are they all supportive of the project? Bringing them up to speed. Big issue, and it's the same for DFT as well. And that can lead, the second point, to a misalignment of strategy, where we have different strategies. And it's a really important issue in terms of governance. How do you do this? Well, getting back, this is the point I was going to make about Northumberland. Some of the planners say to us, okay, does this mean we have to change our local plan? And what you guys are saying. And said, absolutely not. That's the last thing you want to do. No, keep it exactly as it is. But do something like Northumberland are doing. And they've built in, and I don't know the exact words, but they've built in a form of words that says, here's the local plan, but if this railway becomes operational, we reserve the right to revisit some of the areas along the corridor of that local plan in terms of a sustainability corridor. We're not saying yes, we're not saying no, but we want to revisit it. So it's given them that flexibility to make the decision, like the one I showed you at Newsham, whether they will change that or whether they will not. And that's a very good situation. The other thing I would urge government to do is to look at that circle around 1.5 kilometres of every railway station. Quebec Province, Quebec Province built in a bias towards any development that was within 1.5 kilometres of a transit station. And if it was out with that, you had to argue why it was out with that. So it's the other way around. And it transformed the situation. Developers were trying to get stuff around transit rather than arguing against it. And so the government should be looking at that. There's other points here that I don't have time to go on, like the government could set up an investment fund for local authorities to pay some of the upfront costs and utilise these methods and promote that sustainable development. These are policies that should be encouraged by government. So finally, just summing up what I've been saying, you can do this now. It doesn't require any legislation. We've tested this in terms of European law and UK law. There's 2 or 3 ways that say, yep, there's nothing to stop you doing this. You can still do Section 106 and still, if you do that and it's affecting the railway, we take that off, we net that off, so that's still unaffected. You can you should start the process as soon as possible. It's a partnership between the public and private sector, but also legally binding after stage 3. Promoter retains control at all times, and funds are substantial for the rail industry. So there's my email. If you want to email me, George Hazel at erail.co.uk. Give me a call and we'll have a chat about it. It takes a bit to get your head around it all, and there's nuances that I haven't able to say, but I hope you find that interesting. Thank you very much.
Grab a seat, George.
Thank you.
Just let's check. We've got your email on the screen. Oh, I've gone too far. There you go. That's on there, isn't it? Yep. Yeah, great. Sorted. Thank you so much for that, George. That was really fascinating. And I'm going to kick off by taking the chair's prerogative and asking a question of my own, if that's all right. Why, in this context, then, are routes, lines, stations, why are they presented largely as a loss? So they're always presented as a cost. Why, in the light of this framework, is that not more thoroughly explored as the potential for building rather than loss-making?
Well, I think it should be. I think we need to use different language and different methods. I've made the point too about investment in this. And so when we talk about enterprise zones, when local authorities go into enterprise zones, you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk that development will happen. It might not happen, the government putting in. Why can't we think of it the same way as the railway system? And not think in terms that you've just said of loss or whatever. So I think in terms of the business case, I can't go into detail, but it's interesting. We've had talks with Treasury and various banks and whatever. And the question is, what is this money? Is it a loan? No. Is it debt? No. What is it? And how do we account for it in the system? So, and in terms of the modelling, there has to be a change in modelling to say, and I've talked to modelers, it's easy enough to do to say, there's another line down here that says, if there's an LVC line, if the local authority or the promoter goes for that, and if this happens, then this will be the effect on the model, and in terms of the business case. But I think we're doing a project in Australia and two in New Zealand, 2 in Sweden as well. And one of the guys in Australia just last week said to his boss, goodness, we're going to have to change the way we think and our processes. And I think that's part of the problem as well. This is the way we do things, and we don't quite know how to cope with that. But if there was more authorities doing this, I mean, the government has said, we expect the local authorities to come up with 20-25% of the money. Third-party party, well, yeah, you can do it. But the government have got to encourage that in all sorts of ways and give local authority help, like an investment trust. And we've talked to Infrastructure Bank UK, who are interested in this, for local authorities to actually be innovative and have a go at this. But a lot of them have found resistance from government about, that's not the way we do things.
Not the way we do things around here.
Correct. So I think there needs to be a change of, we talked about culture earlier today, that a change of language, a change of culture, to enable local authorities and innovative people in the rail industry to say, why are we not doing this? Let's have a go. Let's try it.
We need to get away from that rigidity of thinking, and that is a huge issue in rail and in transport generally, in planning and infrastructure. We've got to be more creative in the way that we think.
And I think also, I was originally a civil engineer, and we tend to get into our boxes, and even within mobility as a service, everyone's locked on to ticketing. It's all about ticketing. No, it's not all about ticketing. And so we get locked into that. And we've seen this in the rail industry, and we have discussions about could we put development here? Oh, we hadn't thought of that. No, but could we? Oh, I suppose so. Would that be a good thing? Well, yes, it would be a good thing. So, but it's not their fault. They're just locked into that.
Yeah.
So, I was talking earlier we were talking about using teaching people innovation, how to be innovative, and allowing them to be innovative, because a lot of people don't want to take risks because it's risky.
But it's the right kind of risk. I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that what we have to take?
Yep.
I mean, I think it's absolutely fascinating. Are there any questions that the audience would like to put forward? Gentleman over here? If you could say your name, where you're from, and then ask your question, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm James Cook from the Western Gateway, and I'm delighted to hear the presentation because this got raised at an event that we had about 4 weeks ago as an example on a finance discussion, so really great to hear more detail. I'm interested in sign-off. So when Northumberland Council, for example, agreed to enter into the partnership, did that not need kind of a full council decision there, and did that not provoke challenge around the impact it could have on local I know planning is such a sensitive issue for local members. Was it not a major hurdle there, or was the sign-off more simple?
It wasn't, and I get back to the independence of planning. This is where it gets sensitive, because, and this is why it's so sort of difficult for some people to get their head around. The details of each of the individual contribution agreements are not revealed for just the reason you've said. And so there has to be a trust there that it can only be spent for that. But the safeguard is that there is no promises whatsoever. We have no powers whatsoever. So what we're saying is we are safeguarding local authority, your position, that if you choose to build this station or build this railway, then we have secured the land around it for you to choose whether you want to develop it or not. Entirely up to you. We've told you what we can raise. The choice is then yours. And yeah, there has to be a process that Northumberland County Council went through, and with DFT as well, and Network Rail. And I have to say, Network Rail have been really supportive of us. And because of that, I think it's okay, although it's new. When you're dealing, I was just saying this to Daisy earlier, when you're dealing with a two-tier authority, then it becomes doubly difficult. Northumberland County Council was a unitary authority and easier. Some of the other ones we're doing are much more complex, and that's one of the reasons I think the combined authorities are going to be really interesting, in the Northeast as well, to do that. For some of the projects, if it helps you, we kind of do a heat map. So they've got one stream, which is the planning stream. We've got all this growth, where we're going to put it. We've got here, 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 here. On the second stream, you've got the transport stream in terms of how many stations do we need, how does that affect journey time, what's the alignment, whatever. We're adding a third that says, here's a heat map of all the alignments that you're doing and all possible station locations with the LVC potential. So you can either go to increasing existing settlements, if that's possible, or you could have a brand new settlement. Again, your choice. So it's a kind of third line, the decision making. So it's a good question. I think it's really because all of the 100% decisions are still with the local authority. And actually, from a planning point of view, it gives them a much more proactive role in terms of how are we going to plan the future? Do we want a new settlement or do we not? Does that help? Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, George. George does have a train to catch, so you will please take a note of the email address, phone number if you have anything else that you'd like to ask him. But thank you so much for coming to the first day of Rail Live. I hope to see you all again tomorrow, and can we have one last round of applause, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Daisy.